Wow, it happened with just like the slightest touch.
Yeah, it records.
Great. Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Thank you for oh, yeah, sure. Please, there's actually,
This is active.
And the directions.
Find out. Jeez.
go.
That's nothing. Oh, is it a picture? So you're gonna unmute me or am I unmuted?
The whole room is unmuted.
Great, great. Thank you so much.
No problem. Give me a call if you need anything else.
I hope I don't have to, but thanks. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thanks for your patience, everyone. Good afternoon to everyone who's present here in Cross 214 in Augusta. And everyone who is here virtually. My name is Vivian McHale, and this is the October 27th meeting of the Abandoned and Discontinued Roads Commission. I will call this meeting to order and start with, first I will check to make sure. Steve, are you able to hear us well? He might have stepped away.
No, I'm here. Can you hear me okay?
And can't see you, but that's okay for.
I don't know why my video is not working this week, but anyway,
No
yes,
worries.
I'm here. I'm here.
No worries. And Rebecca Graham, is that you, the Graham in the waiting room that I just admitted?
No, I'm right here.
Oh, hi, Rebecca.
I might be there.
Fury, how are you?
But this,
Okay.
this me doesn't know that.
Okay, got it. You can clone, wouldn't that be nice?
All
right.
right, it'd be so nice to them.
Okay, I'm going to move the person who I don't recognize into the waiting room. I don't know who admin 5 guest is, but I feel like that was someone.
Ryan Pelletier on the counties.
Yeah, great. Hey, Ryan, are you able to hear us okay? You're under-
Yes, I am.
You under your clandestine moniker of admin 5.
Yeah, and I can't change it for some reason whenever I'm dialed in on this Zoom for whatever reason. I don't know why.
That's all right. I think we are good. And I will say for now in the waiting room, I see 3 guests, 2 of whom look like they might be duplicates, a J.H. Lowry, a John Lowry, and a Nars Bars, unless one of those people is a commission member that I'm not recognizing.
There are people that want to observe.
Perfect, great, welcome everyone, and we also have a member of the public here, and I believe a few more might filter in as their schedules allow. But other than that, I will call the meeting to order and start with a roll call. Corporal McCabe.
Present.
Brian Bronson. Brian is not able to be here as far as I'm aware. Pete Coughlin,
I am here.
Vivian McHale, I am here. Rebecca Graham, I am here. Carla Black. Here. Jim Katsifikas.
Here.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Steve Young.
I'm here.
Great, we can see you now, just so you
Okay,
know.
yeah, I figured that out. I'm sorry I'm slow.
No problem. Ryan Pelletier,
Here.
John Monk,
Present.
Roberta Manter.
Here.
Kathy Netto.
Present.
Great, thank you and welcome all. I think I'm gonna ask for someone else to take notes and we'll share with you some hopeful news about progress toward a paralegal going forward. But for now, can someone other than Carla take notes, and she so graciously did it last time? It's a hard bar to meet because she did such a great job, I know. Anyone?
Okay.
Great, thank you, Kathy, so much. Why don't we go around by, let's just start we'll go horseshoe direction clockwise, and do introductions for Jim's sake, since he's joining us for the first time. And then maybe going forward, we'll figure out if we want to do that or not. We probably should for members of the public. So do you want to go ahead and start, please?
Sure.
Thank you.
Corporal Chris McCabe from Maine Warden Service, representing the Maine Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife.
John Monk, representing snowmobile and ATV interests.
I'm Carla Black from Maine Woodland Owners, representing woodland property owners. Catherine Nato. Yeah, that's good.
Well, that's important because I realize I've been saying your name incorrectly. Sorry.
That's
Nato.
right.
Thank you.
Roberta Mantor from Maine Roadways.
Jim Katsikas, attorney at Perkins Thompson and appointed by the House Speaker.
Vivian McHale, the designee from the Attorney General.
Pete Coughlin from Maine DOT.
Rebecca Graham from Maine Municipal Association.
Great, thank you, everyone. Our first order of business is ratification of the minutes from our initial meeting on October 7th. I circulated them yesterday. Apologize for the short notice. There were not a lot of changes to Carla's excellent job in taking minutes from the meeting. Are folks comfortable with, should there be discussion about the minutes, I should say? Does anyone have any questions, additions, corrections?
Make a motion, we accept them as read.
Thank you. Any second? Second. So moved. Thank you very much. The next item of business is election of the commission chair. At our last meeting, we went through a round of nominations, which were declined for various understandable reasons. And Jim Katsikas, to my right, who we've all just met, we didn't know him before, had just been, or word of his nomination by the Senate President had just come through before that meeting on October 7th. And there was discussion about Jim's extensive experience with real estate and municipal law and roads in particular. And there was wholehearted support for his nomination. Pete Coughlin and I both had phone conversations with Jim after. I will let him confirm, but he indicated that he's amenable to taking on the role of chair. So I'll turn it over to him for a minute and then we'll make a formal motion.
Thank you for even considering me. I'd be willing to serve as chair if you'd like to help this committee.
Do I hear a motion for the nomination of Jim Katsikas as chair of the commission?
So moved.
Second.
So moved.
Should be a
Congratulations,
vote.
Jim.
Should be a roll call.
A vote, you're right. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. This is not something we typically do, obviously, in many ways. I'll take a roll call vote. Corporal McCabe.
Yes.
Corporal McCabe votes yes. Brian Bronson is absent. Pete Coughlin,
Yes.
Vivian McHale, I vote yes. Rebecca Graham,
Yes.
Carla Black,
Yes.
Steve Young,
Yes.
Ryan Pelletier,
Yes.
John Monk,
Yes.
Roberta Mancher,
Yes.
Kathy Nato.
Yes.
With one member absent, the vote is unanimous and you're gonna tell me the words that I need to say.
Thank you. I guess I have been elected chair of this commission. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Jim, with your permission, I will proceed with the agenda.
I think that would be great. You prepared the agenda and know what the direction was after the last meeting, so.
Great, and then
Perfect.
we'll talk offline and work together about collaborating in any transition sort of thing. Since we last met, I have done some research about where the commission's online presence should live so that it is most intuitively and logically accessed for the public. My first thought was to reach out to maine.gov to figure out if we could have our own separate presence. We can, but that is almost $500 per month. And there's no wiggle room around that. So I have a few thoughts. There are some commercial means by which we can get notices out, such as MailChimp, which is, there's a free level of service that allows us to have, I think, I want to say up to even 1,000 followers, which I don't think we will get that. No, 2,000 contacts. It's the free marketing plan, allows up to 2,000 contacts a month and to send 12,000 emails. So to me, that sounds like a no-brainer to throw in the hopper as something we might want to consider. And the way that works, I believe, is we create a specific roads commission whatever domain through MailChimp. People want to sign up as an interested party. In the beginning, it would be busy managing that incoming mailbox until those people populate into the distribution list. But then after that, it should probably be a trickle of people hearing about it and, you know, that sort of thing. So I'm envisioning a big bolus of work in the beginning, which my office will take on. And then that sort of runs itself. As far as, and I spoke to a former colleague of mine from the AG's office who's now at the Ethics Commission, and she showed me some examples. We can, via MailChimp, we can send out blasts of meeting notices, agendas. Once I figure out how to make these recordings accessible off the main OneDrive, which has been a problem and I'm working on it, we can send out meeting links, that sort of things, or recordings. We can send the Zoom link for the next meeting, that kind of thing. So I think that that is a really helpful thing. I do think we need a place, though, for people who haven't signed on. If someone has an abandoned or discontinued road issue and they say, who do I go talk to? We need something online so when people Google that, it takes them to the existence of the Abandoned and Discontinued Roads Commission, and then they can sign up via our MailChimp account. So my thought is, and I imagine this might take some thinking or take it back to higher ups, but it seems to me intuitive that we would have some sort of notice on the DOT website. And I'm wondering if DOT has its own main.gov platform that this commission could kind of piggyback on. And maybe that's even too much if we want to go the MailChimp route, but if there's a place on the DOT website of notices or news or something like that, where it can be just highlighted and hyperlinked, new Abandoned Discontinued Roads Commission, maybe with the list of our members from the Secretary of State's office. For more information, email, and then it directs folks to the MailChimp account, and then they would get those automated emails once we have things to be telling people about. So I would think DOT, maybe IF&W, maybe Maine Municipal would want to do it. I just don't think anyone's going to look at the AG's office for this stuff. Roberta.
If it's any help, last time I checked, if you type in a Google search for just discontinued roads Maine or abandoned roads Maine, my website pops up at the top.
Sure. Yeah. Well, it should live there too. I mean, so I think any of the commission members who has an affiliated online presence and can get approval from your agency or department to have our information in the direction to sign up for the interested parties list, I think the more places, the better. Because the next thing we'll talk. Yeah, no, go ahead. I'm sorry.
May I interject on that one? I think in northern Maine here, if you would run advertisements on Channel X radio, you would reach more people than anything else. A lot of people up in northern Maine that might have these issues don't even have a computer, let alone do this kind of stuff. If they had, if you ran ads on Channel X radio, which everybody has on there, the only station, right? Except for Canadian stations, or MPBN also would be great. If you put it out there that, here's information available to you, and then you give them a link, or then you give them a telephone number, it'd be much, much more effective, and it would support business in northern Maine of our Channel X radio here in northern Maine.
You make a very good point about accessibility. Technologically, The issue with your suggestion is budget. We don't have a budget for any expenses. So that's why I was looking for ways we could do it via existing agencies, online presence, or with this free account through MailChimp. We have the budget to hire a paralegal, but we don't have any other, there was no other line item in the fiscal note.
Have you considered partnering with the university system for broadcast on their radio systems?
I can't say that I have, but that's something we could consider.
Thank you.
I think that is something that when we, knock on wood, have a paralegal in the intended position, that's something that that person could look into. Jim?
This can't be the only commission that was ever created between sessions of the legislature to carry out some activities. What's happened with those in terms of advertising or web presence?
I'm not sure I can answer that question specifically, but I can tell you what is a little bit different about this one. This one was sort of curiously housed in the Attorney General's office. Because as everyone was wrestling with these really complicated issues, Senator Claxton said, wow, there's gonna be a lot of legal stuff about this. Let's get the AG's office in on this and let's get them to hire a paralegal and staff it. Or have a paralegal and staff it. So the AG's office, quite frankly, is gonna have to say, we can't opine on this because this could put us in a position down the road if there's ever an adversarial proceeding. We actually think this is a municipal issue, not a state issue. So there's all your question raises. So other commissions live with departments that have online presences like that.
What's the committee of jurisdiction with state and local?
Yeah.
Is there a website for state and local government committee?
They have pages in the legislative, under the legislative website, and we can get things like meeting notices put on the calendar, which I have done, but you can't link to documents.
All right. Sorry, I'm
And
just trying to.
No. These are all very good questions, and they're all the ones that I asked when this became my project. And because there isn't a sitting legislator on this commission, it can't be staffed by OPLA, which might have been another way to disseminate information or have other places for this information to live. So that's why it's a little bit of sort of an unusual kind of way to make sure. I mean, maybe in the end, we're going to be getting information out even more diligently and voluminously than other commissions. It's possible, but
But for now, it's an orphan.
it's a loved orphan with
Yes.
12 new caretakers. But yes, exactly.
How about just an announcement through the communities, through the town offices? You could charge them or offer them the ability to disseminate it to the community one way or the other, whether it's a poster or mailings. You know, that would be a good way. Maybe they would agree to it, add it to a bill that they have, whatever. You know, there are sewer bills that go out like a couple periodically, you know, whatever. You could coordinate that with a community that would be interested in this. Lord knows Frenchville here where I'm living has had their problem with roads and who's got what rights. So I think it'd be very interesting to the population up here. I think the communities would be a natural way to disseminate the information. Thank you.
That's a great idea. Thank you. And I wonder, Rebecca, is your membership, is that a reasonable starting point? If I were to draft a notice, for instance, the next item on our agenda is we need to put notice out of our proposed policy on remote meeting participation. We have to put notice of that to the public before we take a vote on it. Do you have any sort of email blast distribution list or something where this would be appropriate for that?
We have a couple of distributions that might be appropriate for an email blast. They tend to get hit with 1,000 from all of the different departments within MMA.
Okay.
So they tend to get buried, but we could certainly place announcements on our website as primary, and then also in our newsletter, which goes out monthly,
Great.
and within our magazine again monthly.
And when does your next one go out?
Well, the next one goes out tomorrow, so that one's already
Okay.
done for the e-newsletter, but it can go on the website at any point in time. And
Okay.
it's usually around the 20th of the month is a good time. Is
Okay.
kind of the deadline for the e-newsletter.
Great. So looking ahead to putting out adequate notice for the consideration of the remote meeting policy. maybe on your website works, not the e-newsletter, because Jim and I had talked about having 7 days notice should be sufficient for something like this, because we really want this out and done with so we can vote on it and start acting accordingly pursuant to that policy, starting at our next meeting in November, because winter months are starting. People are not going to want to be hoofing it to Augusta. All of you, a lot of you have made a real effort to be here on short notice as we're getting this up to speed. So I'd like to really alleviate that to maximize participation. So between MMA's website, Pete, do you know if this is something that is gonna, do you have to run the traps on this?
Yeah, I'm gonna have to
extensively?
check, I gotta check to see if this is possible. I'm wondering what you want to post. Is it something that's gonna change and need to be updated all the time, every time we have a meeting with minutes and agendas? Or is it gonna be, is that gonna rest somewhere else so that if we happen to put anything on our website or anybody else here, it's just a link to something else?
Yeah.
Then, and so I don't have to have our webmaster changing stuff all the time, because I know that's not gonna happen.
Yeah, no, very valid. And what I'm envisioning, and someone stop me if this thinking is faulty in some way, what I'm envisioning is to start, have a link to the remote meeting policy and our next meeting so that that piece is taken care of, but also with a link to whatever MailChimp account and generic email I set up so that it's for more information, sign on here kind of thing. And then that's what will live there sort of forever.
So is MailChimp a website service or is it just a mailing service?
It's both. When you say mailing service, what do you mean?
Well, I know I get MailChimp things, just emails that people have sent out a blast email through MailChimp, so
Yeah.
it seems to be just an email service. But are there websites that can be set up that this stuff would reside on through
I don't-
MailChimp?
I don't think so. And setting up a commission website is, I haven't gotten quite that far, except to know that through maine.gov, it costs $500 a month. So if people have other ideas, for sure, but if we could, if between MMA, DOT if possible, roadways. Carla, I don't know if your organization has a spot on its website where it could notify of next meetings, just or something.
We would like, the Upper St. John River organization maintains a website. We're trying to promote natural science education, conservation. And this would be we'd love to do this. But
Great.
again, you have to have, again, put it on the radio, go to upperstjohnriver.org, upperstjohnriver.org. And then we could put whatever information you have. I've already been putting information from university, academia, government, main local related to conservation and natural science information. So we'd be happy to do something like that for you. And we could, I think you'd be able to just send somebody to the website and have a download available. For example, we have our own standards for wildlife habitat and biodiversity assessments and management. We've also got all these other government documents that have been done in the area. We'd be happy to download this. If you could have a downloadable one pager where somebody could look on that and they would have a link that they could go to or a telephone number, right? That'd be easy to do. So I'd be happy to do it. I'm the president of the organization. We're small, but we're growing, and we have a website. We can do that.
That's great, and I was getting to you, no doubt, but I would say everyone around the horseshoe and on Zoom, and Brian as well, to the extent that they can find a place on their organization's e-presence, it makes sense, since these are the folks who are tapped to be participating and weighing in on these issues, that's a place where the information can get out. And then, of course, down the road, we can look towards wider dissemination of information when the commission is fully staffed, because I think that's
we also have something else to offer. We have an ADRC map license for our organization. So we might be able to provide like maps of different roads and things like that. We'll have that capacity. So just to let you know, we have an account for a nonprofit account for our organization for ArcMap and that sort of thing.
I think I understand what you're saying, but I don't really know what ArcMap is. Can you explain that just a little bit?
Yeah, it's geographic information system, just like if you'd go online and look on Google Earth, for example, and you could look at any particular property. For Esri is the company, and they make several products, including ArcMap, that enable geospatial information. So for example, on our community properties here locally, we have geospatial information of the boundary of the property, and within it, we've got geospatial information I can project for roads, soils, contours, all this kind of stuff, and associated databases. So for soils, for example, you've got databases available for a compatibility with construction or for prime farmland type of potential, this kind of thing. So it just basically, if you, like, for example, if you look at a map of the United States, if you had a GIS map of that, you could click on Maine and I could build any database I want. So with this, there's all these available databases on roads, contours, like geopolitical boundaries and all this kind of stuff. So we have that already, including the roads and the secondary roads. So in this case, I can make maps of any secondary road or decommissioned road, or create a line feature for any of those and make that available for the particular concern.
Great, thanks for that explanation. I imagine other folks here know more about that than I do. That's really helpful, and that sounds like something we'll probably want to use at some point. Trying so hard not to say down the road.
It's an easy one.
It really is like that.
It's right.
It's a really, yeah.
Sorry, that was bad too.
No, puns are good. Puns are good.
So at any rate, I think what we're hearing is that there are a number of organizations that can link to a website with this commission's work on it. We just need to find a website. Who's in charge of Maine.gov?
It's a good question. I don't know the name of the person, but
Who do I have to call to say, you're going to charge a state commission with no budget, $500 a month in order to put his public work on the website of the state of Maine?
probably OIT.
It's OIT.
OIT?
Yeah.
I'm more than happy to find out who that person is for
I'm
you,
more than
Jim.
happy to take that.
If I could interject again, our website, you can go to upper stjohnriver.org. That costs us $25 a month. Okay. So, and it's not as expensive as you might think. You're probably paying a middleman to do the design and what have you, but you could have some basic information available on a website and purchase it and probably be in for the website itself might cost you like, say $15 a year. And then the hosting is another thing. That's a little more, but we could host you. And then you have that's it. So you're talking $25 a month for hosting a website.
Understood, and that seems like a good deal. The problem is that just where this commission's been established by the state legislature to put together proposals for the legislature to consider, it ought to be hosted on the main website and with links to your website and to your, and let's see if we can run that down, because otherwise we're gonna have to hold a bake sale or something in order to pay the state $500 a month. It seems kind of a foolish
No,
thing.
that's perfect. Much agreed. Yeah.
Okay, we'll run that down. Thank you. Sorry to jump in.
Oh, no, you're more than welcome. Thank you so much. Any other comments, questions about agenda item number 6, online presence?
I think like from our perspective, like we have our landowner relations page that people could jump to. So if they have, we get frequently asked questions like that, but we just gotta have a landing spot for them to go to. So it would be an easy spot for them to find it, see the link, and then go to that landing spot that's there. Same with DOT.
That's great. Thank you.
Do you envision a pre-formed text that we can cut and paste on our website to or a PDF that you're gonna send around?
Definitely.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, something like the equivalent, like with Steve saying, a one pager or one screener, like something that would be aesthetically pleasing in some sort of text box or something like that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Good.
And then a link to, once I set up MailChimp, just for people to sign on for further ongoing information.
One other idea, mentioning having a bake sale kind of reminds me, I know a lot of radio stations will post community events for free. Would this qualify under that kind of a thing?
That's usually where you post public meetings, but, you know, if people want to. If you wanted to follow up with an ad or somebody wanted to follow up with a link and pass that along that way or on Channel X, I've never. Listened to Channel X, but I haven't been far enough in the county lately, so. I don't know what I'm missing. So yeah, I mean, people can follow up with it as they will. But I think the important thing here is to have a website where meetings, documents can all be posted. There's a central location, and then other folks can link to it from the private organizations. If one of the member organizations is hosting, it doesn't seem right. It really should be a state function.
Agree.
We'll see if I'm convincing enough.
So Vivian.
No, I agree with that. I had offered it just as a courtesy, but I still do believe that there should be a focused and concerted effort to share this information with every town in northern Maine, because people are not online like you're talking. So normally, but if you disseminate it to the town, leave it up to them to have printed copies available to the public. And then if you want to advertise on Channel X or not, that if you want this information to show up to your town office, I would do it that way, but you can do it whichever way you want. But I do think it would be nice to have that printed copy with the link on it. Then the people that don't know how to do it, then can ask their relations to help them and go online and get what they need to get.
Can I ask though, what exactly is it we're talking about trying to provide for information? I mean, I think it's just meeting notices. Is that what we're talking about here? So,
I mean, eventually it will be the report.
Or the draft report.
right, okay. Oh,
It's not a lot.
I was thinking it was information related to the laws and what you have to do in these different circumstances. Where there's a decommissioned road, you have a particular interest in it, might be a snow sled club or whatever, and you'd like to know where to go to get the information you need. That's what I was assuming.
yeah, I don't think that's the charge of this commission. I think our job is to look at the laws and come up with recommendations on how to, change, maybe suggest changes to the current legislation, current laws, but sure we'll learn as we go.
I think Steve is,
Item 8.
yeah, I mean, I think Steve is right. I mean, we are an advisory commission. We are not a state entity that's a clearinghouse to direct people in individual situations. If that was the case, the AG's office would not be able to be involved. But I think that everyone's thoughts are absolutely in the right place. We want the information out there as efficiently and as, broadly cast as possible until we can get to a place where we have our own sort of web presence where it can all live in one place. And then those other avenues can be filters for people to that one place. Short of that, I can set up the MailChimp account so that folks who are in the room and know people who wish they could be here can sign on and be advised of next meeting dates, agendas, and the Zoom meeting recordings once I get those accessible to people. Any other thoughts on item 6, discussion of commission's online presence? I think we are ready to move on to number 7, which I don't think we had a pretty fulsome discussion of the proposed policy on remote meeting participation, and folks were comfortable with it. We asked some questions about how it works, and I don't think anyone had any heartburn about any of it. It's now just a matter of posting notice of it so that we can then vote on it at the next meeting, and then we can work under it, and with the chair's discretion, folks can participate remotely going forward after it is voted on. Does anyone have questions about that? Seeing none. I think we can move on to agenda number 8, which is a little bit of a kitchen sink because we had not gotten very far in our initial meeting as to how we wanted to break up our charge here under our statutory duties of what to consider and what to prioritize. But I think now is the time to start figuring out the contours of our work and who's going to focus on what, with an eye towards our report that is due February 1st and then annually thereafter. I think we all agree we don't need bylaws, but we may need subcommittees to do some side work in between our meetings. So I'll start by opening it up there. I don't know if Jim wants to take over with some initial thoughts, or if anyone has any carryover thoughts from our last meeting.
I have a question. If we go the route of needing subcommittees, are the subcommittees subject to the same public notification requirements and also needing to adopt a remote meeting policy, or is the adoption of the remote meeting policy that we will do cover the subcommittees?
We will make sure that the remote meeting participation policy will also pertain to subcommittees. And yes, you're absolutely right, Ryan. Any subcommittee or of this commission is going to be subject to the Freedom of Access Act, which means notice, public right to attend.
Very good question. Very important point. I need to step out to get a little bit of water. The one thing I will say, I don't know if we do it as a subcommittee or how people want to do this, but given the fact that our report is due in February, I think we need a specific dedicated group of people who's going to work on pulling that report together so it doesn't fall all to the chair and the paralegal. And I would be happy to be part of that small group.
Thank you.
And I will be right back. Pardon
One
me.
thing to think about, we're now at the end of October. We have a report due in February, which means we have 4 meetings. Well, 3 meetings really, substantive, November, December, and January, if we're going to meet once a month. So that may influence how much we want to or able to tackle to get something responsive back to the legislature.
I think the final report can also be that in a
That last
limited
meeting.
time.
Yeah.
We accomplished a limited amount and have something more substantial.
Which is why it's going to keep going beyond that February date.
Yeah, Jim, I don't know if this is similar to other boards or committees that I've been on, similar to this at the state level, but usually that first report that we have to return into the legislature is kind of like more of a summarized report that isn't too lengthy. And then in that report, we kind of indicate that we're going to continue to work to get a final report. Is this different in that regard? Or, was the legislation that got this commission established require a final report by February?
It doesn't say whether it's a draft or final, but it says by February 1, 2023, and annually thereafter, the commission shall submit a report. So I view that as being a final report. So really, we're talking about November, December, doing whatever research and discussion we need so that in January, we're able to act on a draft report so that we can submit it February 1st.
I do think that, to Steve's point, and I only heard part of what you said, but I do think it's perfectly legitimate that if pieces of the report say the commission discussed item B from whatever subsection of the statute and determined that because of X, Y, and Z, further study is required. I mean, obviously, we don't want to default to that on everything, but these are very complicated issues. So I think that to the extent that it's a final report, final for February 1st, 2023, can indicate that our work is ongoing.
My understanding was that it was to be a progress report, not that they were doing,
Yeah.
if it were a final report, we wouldn't need the commission after that.
Right.
And they made it a permanent commission because they realized this is going to be around for a while.
Progress report, I think, is a great way to put it.
But it would be a final progress report of the progress made to date.
Right.
And there may be issues that we identify that we weren't able to reach agreement, or we just ran out of time, and they'll have to be considered in the future. Let's just look at the statute maybe as a jumping off point.
That's under number 11, report.
Well, if we start back with regard to duties, what is it we're supposed to be doing and what's going to show up in that report? The commission shall consider the following: property owner liability, including personal injury, property damage, environmental damage liability resulting from public use of an abandoned or discontinued road. Public easement retention over an abandoned or discontinued road, including scope of permitted and actual public use. The statutory terminology related to abandoned or discontinued roads, and the statutory process for abandonment or discontinuance of a road, including barriers to determining the legal status of a road. So those are things we're supposed to consider for matters relating to abandoned and discontinued roads, other than that, which I've just mentioned. Prioritize matter for consideration by the commission. So it indicates we're not going to get to everything, but let's at least get a priority together. By determining which matters related to abandoned and discontinued roads have significant negative impact, qualitatively or quantitatively, on owners of property abutting the road, owners of property accessible only by traveling over an abandoned or discontinued road, recreational users, members of the public, and municipal, county, state government, and the physical integrity of that road. And then develop recommendations on ways to address matters considered by the commission, including any recommendations for statutory changes. And then review existing legislation affecting abandoned or discontinued roads, and provide information to the joint standing committees of the legislature upon request. So that's really the broad description of what we are able to look at, what the legislature has asked us to look at.
May I interject? What we're talking about again is property owner liability, environmental impacts, and the like. And again, you're not going to get to the owners of those people with those problems unless you get it disseminated to the communities. I can't imagine that the communities would not disseminate that information to their populace, but you're not going to get people frigging around on their internet at night and finding this information. So if they have a problem, it can be a very short ad or whatever, or whatever, but they have to point this out to the general person that doesn't have the internet and can figure that out. But the priorities are those property issues. I deal with that all the time. As a nonprofit, we've had property disputes with land butters. We try our best, but and we have watershed properties, for example, in old roads and things like that. So the first thing is to get the word out to people that are not on the internet. And I understand it's an internet link, but you still have to promote its dissemination. Maine Public Broadcasting Network should be able to run a radio ad for you for free, I would think. But just to give them the opportunity to feed into this, because that's the main thing, is that liability and the environmental liability and all those sorts of things. I just dealt with this last weekend. I donated 3 silver maples that I've been raising for 2 years to an abutter on Long Lake because of a problem with a road and erosion and things like that. So again, communication, you got to have a link to the people that don't have the internet up in northern Maine.
Fair enough. I think what we've talked about is having a place to direct those people so they can see the additional information, but the point well taken. We need to be able to get this information out as to when the meetings are, what we'll be discussing, and we'll be trying to figure out given our limited budget, trying to figure out the best way to get that done. And so point well taken, we'll follow up with that to get ready for the next meeting.
I also think that the reason we're all sitting around this table is we all have access to different constituencies and different members of the state of Maine, the citizens of the state of Maine. So to the extent that, like, for instance, Steve, you're very well positioned to get some information out to your neck of the woods. And that's something that we'll all have to do as is appropriate in our areas. But absolutely need to keep in mind the lack of access for some folks.
Well, yeah, I just had an inspiration. My father worked in public relations for years and was instrumental in getting the Boston Publicity Club going. And his theory was, why pay for advertising when you can get news articles for free? And he was very good at it. I know that whenever there's been something on the news about abandoned and discontinued roads, that we get a jump in people getting in touch with us. So if we could get the news media in here and say, hey, look, we know there have been stories about this before. We know it's a problem. People need to know about this opportunity that's coming up to have your voice heard and to be in on this process that's going on. So I think if we could get the news media involved, I think that'd be a good way to get free advertising.
That's
I
a
would
great,
say-
that's a great point. In northern Maine, if you had the St. John, if you gave that one page or like an article, the St. John Valley Times and the Fiddlehead Focus, everybody reads that in northern Maine. That'd be a great idea.
I think that's a great idea, but and maybe this is just my experience or my own cautiousness. The media is a double-edged sword. And there's going to be times where we don't all agree around this table. I think if we can get them to place some ads for us of upcoming meetings and things like that, if they want to do that gratis, that would be awesome. I don't know how much media attention we want on our meetings, quite frankly.
Well, the other point of it is that newspapers these days are staying in business by selling what little illegal advertising, whatever they can, and it's become more expensive. So I don't know how much they're willing to give away for free, but we can ask, and we will ask. So we'll work with you on that. So
yeah, and I'm looking at it like not like an access to the meeting so much as access to the rules, regulations, and guidance for the people that are in those situations.
well, that's right, but understood, and that would be probably a background document that we'd have on the website that we're going to be kicking and screaming to try to establish. So that would also be part of the report, and it seems,
Right.
I think, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. I don't may be jumping the gun or whatever, and I want to make sure we all get our ideas here. One thing that strikes me is it isn't just property owners who are concerned about this. It's also municipalities, counties, and state government. So, you know, when we talk about getting notice out to property owners, we also want to notify local governments because they have a stake and an interest in this as well. And I'm sure MMA will be doing that. So, but just, you know, public easement is a two-way street, so to speak. It's the property owners along it and public is represented by municipalities using it. So when we're looking at the property owner liability, public easement retention, statutory terminology, I think Roberta's pointed this out before. There are at least two different uses of private way in state law, and we're all trying to figure out which the legislature means in any particular matter. So
At least three.
well, I'm thinking of two, but there's probably a third, and we'll take a look at that too. And as far as the statutory process that's been amended lately, it's much more difficult to abandon or discontinue a road. And we can talk about that. We can talk about barriers to it, and part of the barriers were put up because of the beliefs and understandings of property owners. So that's why we have to get the municipal perspective, the government perspective, and the landowner perspectives, I think, in order to be able to discharge our duties and make any suggestions to the legislature. So how do you think we should do that?
I think we should identify some key topics that we want to dive down into before February, that maybe we have space and capacity to do before then. So we have something to report on. And then I think in terms of bringing in stakeholders, we use that to guide, and then we just do direct outreach to those particular groups on that specific topic. And then we could do just general notice for that's interested in the message.
To that end, and this is the lawyer in me, I don't know how we even start to think about what needs to be fixed. without looking at the existing statutory inconsistencies and murkiness that has caused trouble thus far. And Roberta put together the statutes, or at least a lot of them, that we need to look at. This is all new to me, but that's an area that I would be happy to dig in on with some folks to at least identify the areas that need some resolution or tightening for possible future legislation. That seems like I'm not gonna say discreet, because I'm sure it's got lots of tentacles to it, but it seems to be one area that would be really appropriate to be able to report on by February.
This area of law has a vocabulary and a history. And I think it might be helpful to get us all on the same page. I don't know how many times, I was just at a meeting the other day where someone was talking about discontinued roads and really meant paper streets and vacated paper streets. And if you don't understand the differences, it's easy to confuse terms, concepts, and everything can spin out because we're talking past each other. I'm going to make a suggestion. I've been talking to municipal officials and to members of the bar for years about road law, just basically the definitions, how you create roads and how you eliminate roads, which is really what we're talking about here. We're talking about discontinuing roads and abandoning roads. And maybe if I could take half an hour to 45 minutes to put on a primer on road law, just not just from my background, but then Roberta can talk about her, your perspective on how these are applied. And we can take it from there as to what issues might need to be resolved or could be resolved. What's got the biggest priority to try to address? Does that make sense?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because I have the roads and easement part that you contributed to. So I was gonna suggest to you, if you can cover that in a half an hour.
You're going to get the abridged version, digest version. But if we're not talking about paper streets and vacation, and we're not talking about responsibilities for roads beyond just the basic who has the responsibility, I think I can bring it down to half an hour to 45 minutes to talk about the types of roads, how you establish them, how you get rid of road responsibilities, and what state law has required over the years. And we can talk about where the problems might be, as identified by landowners, by individuals, and Roberta's organization. And then maybe we can hone in on those issues that we might be best to address in the short run, recognizing this is these issues have existed for a long time and they're going to continue.
Excuse me for asking, but would these be available in the minutes so I don't have to scroll?
If we were to do something like this,
If you do your half an hour to 45 minutes, we'll be there. Will there be a written, like a follow-up summary of that in the minutes?
I will provide a summary in advance of the meeting, or an overview in advance of the meeting, and then present it here so that you have a chance to read it before the course.
That'd be like, to me, that's the crux of the biscuit right there. If we make that if we make that available to the public, that would be fantastic eventually. Thank you.
Jim, let me ask, with all these, thank you for Roberta for putting all these definitions together from Title 23, 29A, and who knows what else here. But between the words private way and public easement and public way and driveways and so on, that are spread out through 23 and 29A, probably as a result of past bills to try and solve some issue. Is there a way to us, maybe as one of our missions here to clarify statutes, is to end up with a definition in whatever statute that relates to, there's one definition of a public way, one definition of a public easement, one for a private way that's referenced in 23, 29A, 52, 42, and 122, whatever the statute numbers are.
Well, I tried doing that when I was when I was working on staff at Maine Municipal Association, and I got part of the way there. And it was with regard to private ways and private roads. I don't want to take us down that path yet, though. But where we need to be consistent, a goal should be to try to bring some consistency into this so that it is, you're also, it's not only Title 23 on road law, 29A on DOT and highway law, but there's also Title 33 real estate law. Because in Title 23, we look at the roads from the public entity, state, county, municipality point of view. 29A, it's highway regulation, again, the state and municipalities. Title 33 is from the landowner's point of view. If you're buying and selling real estate in Maine, what rights do you have in roads? So I think all three titles need to be internally consistent to the extent we can do it.
Yeah, so shouldn't the definition of a public way in 33, 29A, 23, all relate to the same definition?
Well, they can, it depends. And so there are some nuances with regard to what the state owns versus what a municipality has and how they get there. And in private ways, all right. Brief preview. Back in Massachusetts law, as I understand it, before 1820, the private way, which we adopted here in Maine, was so that the farmer could get his or her goods to town. And so the farmer would give the land, a strip of land, to the town. And the town meeting would accept it and then would maintain it thereafter. So it was a private way subject to gates and bars. People could put gates and bars along there to prevent their cattle from getting out. And you would have this as a private way. The town had the public easement of passage over that. Those private ways all became public easements back in 1976 when the state road laws were rewritten. And at that same time, public easements were expanded to also include access to natural areas. And that was at the urging of a lobbyist for Maine Audubon at that time, who was Senator Angus King. So there are many different, and yet the term private way was meant to mean a private road in the ability to form road associations. So we have two different uses of it in Maine law. That has been amended to now say private ways and roads. That was something that I drafted for MMA, and it was adopted by the legislature back around 20 years ago. But you know, we have these inconsistencies, and some of them can't be resolved. And we just got to learn to live with them and understand they mean different things in different places. But some we can make more consistent, and I think that maybe consistency is a goal that we'll decide is important and of primary importance to this commission once we get through the primer and discussion of the issues that are out there. Does anybody else want to raise, as Roberta will, issues regarding these roads from your perspective? Whether it's from landowner, woodlot owners.
I do have one thing to add. The State Department of Conservation, public lands in northern Maine, in Hamlin, it's a conservation area. And the State Department of Conservation did a significant harvest there last winter, established temporary roads. They had to go into the wetland. So they did mostly winter roads. So that's an example right there that I'd like to find out what would be the subsequent status of those roads established by Maine Department of Conservation on public land in Hamlin. Thank you.
I think that's probably beyond the job description for this commission. Because we're really talking about the road abandonment and discontinuance statutes and not about temporary roads. I appreciate the issue and the concern, but I think it's outside the jurisdiction of this commission.
I don't think it is entirely. You know, we've got a situation right in our town where the Kennebec Land Trust has bought up property on discontinued roads. And I happen to know one of the people on their board, and I told her years ago, she lived on a discontinued road, and I said, you gotta watch out for that, because if people find out that it's a public easement, you're gonna have people tearing up your road. And she was like, no, I don't think it's gonna be a problem. Now that they have the land trust on these roads, they're beginning to find out they've got a problem.
But in that instance, it's a land trust owning land on a discontinued road, which is clearly within the Abandoned Discontinued Roads Commission, as opposed to a temporary road that the Department of Conservation may have established, which I think is a separate matter. But the idea being, if your organization has an issue, whatever you represent with regard to abandoned and discontinued roads, maybe after we go through the road primer, that's the time to talk about what the issues are. Maybe come in with a list of 2 or 3 or 4 issues that your group, your constituency, that you represent has. And then we can take a look at those and see, are those things we should be discussing? And if so, what's the rank? What's the priority? So that those things that are most important to this group in general can get discussed. Does that make sense? Okay, so road primer, and then everyone will raise their issues. So let's say that we've got everything put together. We've done the road primer, we've done the raising of issues, and we rank those issues. Do we then ask for public comment at a meeting? Say that we do this at the November meeting. At the December meeting, we ask for public comment. Say these are the issues that have been raised. This is a priority that they've been raised in, that we're going to address them, because there's only so much time. If 10 issues have been raised, or 12, we may pick, okay, well, we can do 3, we can do 4. These are the 4 issues we're going to discuss. Be prepared to speak to those. We'll give you 3 minutes apiece and ask that you not be repetitive, bring up new information. And people can attend remotely, and therefore we go across the state to get comment. Does that make sense? Do that for the December meeting.
I know I have a bunch of people who want their stories to be heard.
Okay. And
Jim, I would suggest also that we identify some stakeholders, like there will be a number of natural resource groups and land trusts that might have some intersectionality and push it out to them, because they might not be in tune to this.
and also let them know that we'd accept written comment. It's just that if people are going to speak, in order to be fair and give everyone a chance to speak, that's why the 3-minute limitation. I've been seeing that at planning boards and boards of appeals lately. Just make sure everyone gets a chance.
Rebecca, could you please repeat that one for me, what you wanted?
I've just suggested that we reach out to other stakeholders that are broader, like land trusts and like Nature Conservancy, and ask for them to weigh in on that, because this affects them, but they might not be looking at it.
Just to let you know, we are a land trust in northern Maine here.
So if we do that in December, we ask for public comment on the top issues that we've identified at our November meeting. And we identify stakeholders in advance of that, give them notice as well, to try to get as much input from the folks who may have a stake in this matter. Then what we're really talking about is thinking about that input for the January meeting. This is going to be tight. Because, if we're going to make actual legislative suggestions.
Remember, it's just a progress report.
Right, yeah. They make it more of a progress report and less of a statutory change suggestion at that time.
I don't think they're expecting us to come up with proposed legislation that soon. They know this is a big problem. It's why they made a permanent commission. And I have to give Will Toole kudos for coming up with the idea for the commission. We had proposed a bill that wasn't going to fly. And he said that originally he was against doing anything for people on abandoned and discontinued roads. He figured, you knew what you bought when you bought it. And he's heard this issue come back so many times. He has now realized that there really is a problem, and it's a big problem that needs to be addressed. And it's going to take more than just a temporary study group. So that's why I proposed a permanent commission on it.
Well, if between the December and January meetings, a subcommittee were to look at the public comment, the stakeholder comment on the primary issues that we'd identified and come up with several proposals or ideas to address those, how those could be addressed. And then bring those to the January meeting so we could discuss what we would suggest to the legislature for at least policy directions. And then from that January meeting, we could submit the report for February 1. What we might do in January is drawing upon my recent Charter Commission experience, have one meeting where we hash out what should be in the report and then have a very brief meeting to say, here's the draft report, do we agree? Because I think if we're going to submit something to the legislature, it ought to be something that's formally adopted by this commission and not just something that was thrown together.
So you're talking 2 meetings in January.
Correct.
We might struggle to get this room in January.
We were not able to book this room. They don't book out past December, so we'll have to figure out where we'll be.
This will be interesting. So January meeting 1 would be to talk about what policy directions should be put into a report. And then the second meeting would be to adopt that report. We would send the draft out in between.
We're limited to 6 meetings per year. Does it still make sense to have 2 in January?
Well, we could try for 2 in December. But we may want to spend the holidays, with our families, right?
Yeah.
With the commission. No, all due respect.
Unless you. Between your 2 meetings in January, one is the report direction and the second one is to adopt the report. If you have that meeting for the direction, and then the subcommittee on its own adopts a report and then sends it out to everybody to read.
Yeah, I believe, the subcommittee would probably, once the direction is decided upon at that first meeting in January, the subcommittee would then draft the report, prepare it.
Okay,
then send it.
instead of meeting, then we could just send it out instead of having 2 meetings in January.
Understood. The problem is that if we're going to adopt a report, we have to do that in person. We can't have a meeting over the internet and just say, I agree. That would be in violation of the Freedom of Access Act because we wouldn't be acting in public. So that's the concern. So even though we're limited to 6 meetings per year and we'd use up 2 of them in January, it would at least help us to meet our obligation to get a report out, and we'd still have 4 meetings left for whatever business we wanted to get done in the coming year.
And the most important thing is to get this out and to get it,
To get this started.
to get this adopted. And that would, so 2 meetings in January. No. meeting in
May I-
December.
May I ask a question here, Steve? Is this to communicate agreed upon like law and definitions and objectives for these, discontinued and abandoned roads as a matter of communication? Are you looking to change the existing legislation on these things?
I don't know. It is really up to this commission. The question is to identify the problems or identify the major issues. And then of those that are most important to this commission, the first step is to identify some solutions, some policy solutions. If we had more time, we could talk about actual legislation changes if we thought they were needed. We're not gonna have.
No, And I'll yield to the people who have more experience in this, but it's a matter of like, what are you talking about and what are your objectives for it? And so in this case, you do have all these laws related to these abandoned discontinued roads. If it's already set right now in legislation, it's a matter of communication. And that would be helpful for a lot of people too. If it's not, if it's more than that, and there's an opportunity to change legislation based on people's current situations and concerns, that's another. And that involves, again, the public input in northern Maine anyway, which I'm representing. Thank you.
Well, I'll throw one issue out that I think is out there. It's based on what I've seen in the LD. It's the concern of private landowners about their liability for living along a discontinued road. If there's a public easement, the public comes by and then they sometimes wind up have to maintain it in order to get to their houses. And so maybe, I'm just throwing this out there, and that's something that we'll all talk about. Maybe there's a suggestion to limit the liability of property owners who live by there, so long as they maintain the road in a reasonable standard. We encourage people to allow access to land, private land, for hunting, for recreation, passive recreation, by limiting liability for landowners for that use of property. And so long as it's a reasonable use and you're not creating any ultra hazard to people who might come onto your property.
That's an excellent point, excellent example, and that's the sort of thing that we should try to clarify through this process. I 100% agree with what you're saying.
I don't think we have the bandwidth to draft the actual amendment that would do that, but we certainly could suggest the policy direction to the legislature. And the legislature could follow up. Again, I'm not trying to hijack anything here, but just throwing it out as an example. So
Yeah, that's just a piece of it, though. It's not just the liability, it's the expense of maintaining it when the public has free use of it. The landowner can rebuild the road, have a beautiful road that he can, well, as in my husband's case, he had a road fixed up to the point where he could drive his brother's Triumph Spitfire in and out in third gear and not bottom out anywhere. And then a logging company came in and the town told them, oh yeah, it's a public easement, you can use it. And when they were done with it, you couldn't even get through it with four-wheel drive. And
I
you had to rebuild
understand.
the road again. That's the big issue for us.
I understand it. The other side of that coin is that if you live on a road, you get a deed to a public road, you think that's fine. I can get to and from my house. But if the road gets discontinued, you no longer have a private, you never had a private easement to get there because it never was needed. You may rely upon that public easement in order to be able to get to your property. So it, cuts both ways, but again, I'm not trying to jump the gun here, just explain that there are a couple of different perspectives on this. And probably more than a couple of perspectives, because we'll hear from everyone at the table and from the public and from the interest groups. So I think just to go through this one more time to make sure we're all on the same page. November, we'll talk about road law generally. I'll prepare an outline in advance and get it to all the members. And we'll go through a primer on road law. And then we'll talk about what the issues are that each member of this commission has with regard to abandoned and discontinued road law as it stands now. What are the name 3 or 4 main issues? I'll bet we're going to see some overlap, so that we'll wind up with a list of maybe a dozen issues, and we'll pick from that what are the main ones we think we can reasonably focus on in the limited amount of time we have to get a report ready for February 1. With that, we will announce that list of issues and ask for public comment at the December meeting. We'll also identify stakeholders and notify them as well. So we'll get all that input at the December meeting. A subcommittee will meet between the December and 1st January meeting to develop policy proposals that might address those issues and send them out to the commission so that commissioners can think about those. And in January, at that first meeting, we can think about what we're going to put in that report. What policy directions we might suggest in that report. And then a subcommittee will prepare the final report in a draft form for adoption by a second meeting of this commission in January, so that we can file this report with the legislature February 1st. We know it's going to be a progress report. It'll identify policy suggestions. It'll be a guidance document based upon what this commission determines. We'll be addressing more of these issues as time goes on, but at least it's a start. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does, Jim. And I'd just like to put Roberta on the spot here for just a second, if I could, since she's got a lot of knowledge from her years of work on the Roadways Association. Not going into specifics, Roberta, but would you have an idea how many issues your association has with the discontinued and abandoned road statutes in Maine right now? Just a rough number.
I guess it depends on how finely you break down the issues. I think the two biggest ones are the problems caused by roads that became public easements, where the private landowner is maintaining it, but the public can use it. And on the other end of the scale, roads that were discontinued so long ago that there is no public easement or private easement, and properties end up being totally landlocked.
Okay.
Those are the two biggest, and then there are sub issues
Yeah.
within each.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
I think if we're all agreed on that plan, that probably takes us through 8 on our agenda. So, any other business or any other announcements? Going once? Okay. Our next meeting, I know at least one day we're going to rule out.
Right, I just have to find it on my calendar here. Yes, November 17th, from Thursday, November 17th, from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. Almost positive that's correct.
That sounds good. Thursday, November 17th, from 1 to 4 p.m. This location, or we're be on this
This
location?
location.
Does that sound good to everyone?
Yeah, be able to be here, I will try to find someone to fill in for me.
All right.
And December was.
And let's get if we can get to December and at least one January date on the table, that would be great.
December 14th.
December 14th, 1 to 4 as well.
And we have a January date, we just don't have a room.
What was the January date?
January 11th. Yep. At 1 o'clock, to be determined where.
And, okay, good. And maybe what we could do is for the 11th, maybe we could say the 25th for that second meeting
Of December.
of January.
January.
January will have to.
What was the
December
first-
25th would be interesting.
What was the first January meeting date? I'm sorry, I missed it.
Okay, January 11th.
Yeah.
Oh.
maybe.
I can look to see about holding the January 25th, January 11th and January 25th meetings upstairs in room 600, which is the large Attorney General's conference room.
That'd be great.
The only reason I didn't hold these there was because there's no way to get word of those out. The reason we're here is because you can at least get it on the legislative calendar. But there's no dissemination of what's happening in those rooms, but I can look to try to book that.
Yes, you were mentioning about the importance for in-person participation there. Should I try to plan to get down there to be in person for the next meetings? It's a long way.
Hopefully our remote meeting policy will be in effect by then, and then I think it will be a matter of facts and circumstances for people being able to be here in person, because we'll be able to take votes electronically once that policy is in place.
And also, the legislature did amend that law to remove that expectation of being physically present. That became effective in August of this year. So we could probably line that up from our policy for the next meeting.
Okay, thank you very much.
But the idea is if you feel that you would get more out of being at the meeting in person, you're certainly welcome to be physically present. But the idea is that it's a large state. And we want to make sure that everybody can participate. And that's remote participation has been great. It was done by default under COVID because it's the only way we could all get together and have public meetings. But I think the experience has been for a lot of local governments that it's increased participation in governmental matters. So
Yes,
glad you heard me.
we're 5.5 hours one way from Augusta. So, yes, it's important for us. Thank you.
Any other business for today?
There was somebody who asked last time for a link to the book that I referred to that Hancock County Registry of Deeds put online. I've got the link for it, if anybody wants it.
Okay, great. We'll see Roberta for the link to the Hancock County Registry of Deeds book. Otherwise, is there a motion to adjourn?
I so move.
Okay, second. And we have to do a roll call vote.
Corporal McCabe,
Yes.
Brian is absent. Pete,
Yes.
I vote yes. Rebecca?
Yes.
Carla?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Ryan?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Roberta?
Yes.
Kathy?
Yes.
And are people okay with the use of first names?
Yes.
Is that
Yes.
great?
Yes.
Put that to a vote? Yeah, okay, good. All right.
I don't think we need a motion for that one.
Okay, great.
All right, thank you all very much.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Jim. So
Thank
great to
you,
have
everyone.
you.
It will be fun. Thanks.
Yeah, this is gonna be- I'm really looking forward to your primer. Tell you why as soon as I get off this meeting.
Oh, my God. Thank you for the pen.